Good afternoon, I'm Diana with KOTA Now. Today we'll be talking about how the way your house is built can improve your quality of life through old age and unexpected injuries, and why you should start thinking about it now. I had the pleasure of interviewing Leacey Brown, who was a part of Voices for Home Modification. We talk about what makes a home accessible and adaptable, and how it benefits people, including people who are not living in that home. These 6 questions Leacey gave me help determine how accessible your home is. Does your home have at least one no-step entrance? Does the main floor have extra wide hallways, minimum of 48 inches, and doors minimum of 36 inches? Does the main floor have lever-style handles on doors and faucets? Does the main floor have a bathroom shower that has no barrier and can fit a wheelchair? Can the main floor electrical controls and outlets be reached from a seated position? And does the main floor have a bedroom or a room that can be used for sleeping? We're going to play that interview now and find out how the answer to these questions affect the quality of your life as you age. Afterward, I'll check for any questions and comments.
So if you could just state your name and what you do.
Yep. My name is Leacey Brown. I am a South Dakota State University Extension gerontology field specialist.
You are involved with for Home Modification.
Yep, Voices for Home Modification of the Dakotas, yep.
And could you just describe what an accessible home is and what the qualities of that are?
So an accessible home really is one that is constructed for people who currently have disabilities. And that really does range a lot depending on the person. It really is constructed in a way that meets the needs of a person who currently has a disability.
And what is an adaptable home and what the qualities of that are and how it differentiates from an accessible home?
Definitely. An adaptable home is constructed in a way that when you need to renovate it for accessibility, it's more easy to do so. Really, adaptability focuses on 4 structural features of the home. That would be your entrance. So is it no step, or is it built in a way that you could add a ramp or a lift later? The next feature would be having a bedroom on the same level as the entrance, having a bathroom on the same level and entrance that is sized and spaced for a wheelchair user. And then finally, the next feature is having wide halls and doors. So those features really are about the bones. And the cool thing to know about an adaptable home is it doesn't have to be a single level home. It can have a second floor. The key is just to make sure that the stairs are wide so that if you ever need to add a stair glider, you can do it. Now, how is that different from an accessible home? We would hope that an accessible home has the features of an adaptable home, but that's just not always the case, especially when you're dealing with existing construction. Much of existing construction is not built in a way to make it easier to renovate for accessibility. So accessibility really is, about customizing a home to meet the needs of somebody who has a disability, whatever that disability is. It can range. It could be the needs of a wheelchair user, it could be the needs of a walker user, whereas adaptability is just the bones. It is the canvas you need to make a home accessible.
Who all is affected by accessible or adaptable housing?
The truth is, we're all affected at some point in our life. There are these facts of life. They include, injury, they include accidents, they include surgery, they include the frailty that accompanies increasing age. These are just events that every individual and family will experience at some point of their life. So truthfully, it's an issue for all of us. Beyond, our individual experience with disability, accessible housing also benefits emergency medical service providers. It benefits in-home care providers. It benefits family caregivers by giving the space that is necessary for those individuals to help people in need in the home.
And could you elaborate a little bit about how accessible and adaptable housing affects like first responders or caregivers?
Definitely. Um, when you're thinking about accessible housing and the needs of people who use mobility devices like walkers or wheelchairs or crutches, it's mostly about having space. And space is needed in key areas of the home. The number one space is the bathroom. Often what happens is emergency medical services will find someone who has fallen in the home. Unfortunately, the bathroom is a common place to fall, and individuals will fall in a way in the bathroom that makes it difficult for emergency medical services to get in there to help, especially with traditional approaches to with bathrooms which seem to be pretty small. Some bathrooms are larger in newer units, but typically bathrooms are pretty small, and those small sizes make it difficult for emergency medical services to get in there, let alone use any of the assistive devices they have to make their job easier, whether that's a lift of some sort, a gurney, what have you. They can't bring those tools into many of the homes simply because the halls are too small, the doors are too small, the stairs going upstairs are really narrow. They just don't have the space to maneuver their equipment in homes, let alone help people if it's in a fall or another emergency situation.
So what would be the estimated average cost of an accessible or adaptable home?
That's great, because that's always the question, and I can't answer that easily because I'm not directly involved in the building and constructions of home, but I can highlight where the costs are, and they really are determined by the lot that you select for building a home. Some lots are just, they are more rocky, they have water drainage issues, and because of that, there are expenses associated with getting an entrance to be no step or to minimize that rise above grade. That's why I'm not advocating for all homes to be on grade homes. That simply just is not practical from a building perspective, from a cost perspective. But the idea is to pre-plan for ramps. So how you deal with the cost is by planning ahead. So for example, when you're thinking of that threshold between the exterior door and the deck, you make sure that is flush, that there's no step between the deck and the threshold of the house. That makes it easier to add that ramp later or to add a lift later. The other costs really involve making trade-offs as a person who is building a home, as a builder who's building a home. Space is what is really needed in units in order to make them accessible in the future. So the space we're talking about is in your hall. It's going to be in your bathroom. So when you need to add space to your halls and your bathrooms, that means you have to give up space in other places. So you might have to give up space in your bedroom or your bathroom, your kitchen. You might have to give up space in another room to ensure, like the living room, to ensure you have that space in that bathroom and those halls. So that's really where the costs come in. You might have to give up on the size of some of your bedrooms, maybe, your living room. You might have to give up a little bit of space there, and I have seen small units that have the wide halls, that have the wide doors, and they're still very nice units, but that's really where the trade-off comes, is you have to give up space elsewhere in the unit.
So would that be something that the builder should focus on, or the homeowner? Because you mentioned that everyone will or should possibly think about this throughout your life. When should they start thinking about that? Sorry, kind of a double question.
I think people need to start thinking about this in their 40s, especially if you own a home. Many of these existing units, they don't have the wide doors. They don't have the bathroom that sized in space for a wheelchair user. So as a person who owns a home, it's important to start thinking about it younger in life, because it can take many years to do all the renovations that are necessary. The bad news is that so many people wait until they are retired. They are living on a fixed income. They don't have the time, they don't have the means to make the renovation, and they're sitting in a hospital waiting to come home. So really, homeowners need to be thinking about this sooner. And I would like to see more new units that are going up, when you see someone who's putting up a lot of units at once, I would really like to see those units have more of that adaptable thought process put into them, so that, when somebody buys that unit, because that's what I'm seeing in my work in this field, is that when people build their own units, it seems like they put in the wider halls, they put in the wider doors, they put in a wheelchair accessible bathroom. They are the people who are building their own units are very open to this idea, and they are implementing this idea. But those of us who are buying units, we are stuck with what, is being put in the market for us to buy. So it's going to take us many years to renovate those, if they can be renovated at all. For example, split foyers. Those are extremely difficult to renovate for accessibility.
So you had mentioned, people, they often build it themselves or have to modify it themselves, but sometimes think about it too late. How would you go about that if you didn't have the money for a modification?
So there are some options in the state of South Dakota. If you are living in a home and you need to make renovations, but you have arrived at the place where you don't really have the means or the knowledge, you can check two databases here in South Dakota. One is Dakota at Home, that is run by the state of South Dakota. You can check their database and learn a little bit more about who might provide those home modifications, as well as who might fund them. The other database that we are referring people to is the Helpline Center. They also have information about different programs available in South Dakota to help people pay for the cost of home modifications. And we have a link on the STSU Extension website. I encourage you to go to the Extension website and check out our How to Find and Pay for Home Modifications webpage. That webpage will provide information about how to get to Dakota at Home, as well as how to get to the Helpline Center. It even has a guide on there that describes all the different programs that are available in South Dakota. So definitely go to the South Dakota State University Extension website and look for that How to Find and Pay for Home Modifications webpage, and that will give you information about where to turn if you or someone you know needs help.
Do you possibly have an estimation of how many accessible homes are in this area?
The best estimation I can honestly give you comes from some data that my colleagues and I collected in 2018. This data comes from 668 people who live in North Dakota and South Dakota. And I think one of the key questions is the bathroom. The bathroom is arguably the most important room in the house. When I talk about the need to pre-plan for accessibility renovations, what people like to bring up is the laundry room. And for me, the laundry room is not an essential feature when it comes to having a home that can be adapted for wheelchair accessibility. The truth is, having a laundry room that's on the main level is not going to keep someone in the home long term. I mean, honestly, when's the last time that you heard somebody had to go to a nursing home because they could no longer do laundry? More often than not, reasons for going to the nursing home are unrelated to doing laundry. They're more to do with ability to do personal cares and needing help in that place. So this data that I have from 2018 indicates there are only about 13% of the 668 people who completed our survey were able to say that they had a main floor bathroom that could fit a wheelchair. So that's 13%. That's a very small portion of those 668 people who could reasonably stay in their home through end of life. And that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve here, is we are trying to help people learn what they need to know to remain in the home through end of life.
And what would you like that percentage to end up being? What's the ideal?
The ideal, it's not practical for all homes to be renovated. I mean, it's just simply not possible. But I think if we could get closer to half, we would be in a lot better places, because some people are going to co-house. And that's the benefit of adaptable homes. If you have an adaptable home that has that bathroom, If a mother or a father needs to live with an adult children for a period of time while they're dealing with chronic disease or they're recovering from surgery, that's an option for that family. And that can save that family tons of money. If you think about how much it costs to use facility-based care for rehabilitation, when oftentimes that stuff can be done in the home if you have that wheelchair accessible bathroom present.
Do you know if the amount of accessible homes or adaptable homes vary by state, and if so, why or why not?
Would assume the answer is yes, because I know some communities and some states have implemented codes, like somewhere in the Northeast has implemented a visitability code, and a visitability code basically ensures that somebody who uses a wheelchair could visit the home. So I know some states have done that. So I would guess, based on what I know, is that some states have more accessible homes available than others. And that's one of my goals. So many states are trying to figure out how to house people who need additional care and support. And the way we did it in the 20th century is we use facilities like nursing homes and assisted livings. And what we're learning is the cost of those options are just so expensive that we need to find lower cost options. And one way to find lower cost options is to create housing where care can be reasonably provided. And unfortunately, the existing homes, many of them are not places where care can be provided reasonably. People are receiving care in the home, and oftentimes, I shouldn't say often, but many times in homes that aren't appropriate, but they're still choosing to remain in the home as opposed to other solutions.
Now, along that point, besides, cost aside, is there something that an assisted living facility offers that you can't get if you were to stay at home?
Not really. Not really. Because essentially, almost every service that can be provided in an assisted living facility or even a nursing home can be done in a home-based setting. There are providers in the community. They are called home care providers or home health providers. Home care is non-medical services and support. Home health is medical services and support. And there are providers across the community. I will say rural communities have less providers than urban communities. So if you live in a community that has home care and home health, then yes, many of those services and supports that you can receive in an assisted living or a nursing home can be done in home-based settings. The one caution I would offer is the socialization. That could be like the one thing that an assisted living and a nursing home can offer is opportunities for socialization through different activities, engagement with other people who are living in those facilities.
And kind of going back, you mentioned sometimes they're not as available in certain locations. Why is that? Why are they not super available? Is it cheaper, faster, easier?
So when you're talking about rural communities and why aren't the services providers available, a lot of it's just the nature of being rural. Rural places, if you get outside of the metro areas in South Dakota, Rapid City, Sioux Falls, Aberdeen, you get out of those metro areas and there's just less people, less businesses who provide those in-home health services or those in-home care services. And I think that just is the nature of being rural, the nature of having a smaller population, having a smaller workforce. There's just not as many providers in rural places. So
along those lines, should that also, or would that also be a focus, trying to find more people who will offer that are in the careers that is needed for accessible housing?
So when it comes to getting those services and supports in the homes, rural communities, I think, they're going to have to be innovative. We're going to have to look to our friends, our relatives that are in the community with us, because we don't, when it comes to aging and getting older, we don't all experience aging at the same rate. Some of us age much quicker than the rest of us. And, people will have to come together and provide those supports. There'll have to be someone who, helps with clearing the snow, who helps with the chores around the house, who helps with the lawn maintenance, who helps with the cleaning, who maybe runs people to get to appointments. That's really going to take the community itself figuring out like what's going to be the best option for that community. My colleague in North Dakota, she has an aging in community project that's focused on rural communities developing a volunteer service that can provide some of those services and supports that the older people in the community need, or the people with disabilities, whoever needs support in the community.
And so what are some of the difficulties for modifying or finding an accessible or adaptable home?
So I think the major difficulty can be finding the providers who have the expertise to actually do the renovations. There is some things that a person needs to understand about, like, how do you do these renovations? How do you build the ramp? Like, how long can the ramp be before you need to add a landing? Like, how big does the pad need to be if you're going to add a lift? So there's a little bit of specialized knowledge that a contractor needs to have in order to be able to successfully provide accessibility renovations to consumers. There are 4 certifications that you can look for. Um, Senior Home Safety Specialist by Age Safe America, Certified Environmental Access Consultants, Certified Aging in Place Specialists. There's an executive certificate in home modification. You can definitely reach out to me if you want more information about how to find who might have those trainings in our area. But the problem is there's not a lot of people who have received that training in the area, so that is a challenge. Because existing construction was not built with the thought of pre-planning for wheelchair accessibility, it can be expensive to renovate these units. So for example, you can't make all the doors in an existing unit 36 inches. That's simply just not practical, not feasible. So that can be a major barrier to making those renovations in the home. Structural barriers are probably the #1 barrier in general. So if you, like, my house is one that I am really struggling with to figure out, will I be able to move a wall to increase the size of my bathroom? And I won't know that until I'm really down to demolition, whether or not the wall in question can be relocated. So sometimes, you're dealing with the bones. Like, see, adaptability is about the bones. You're dealing with the bones of a home that simply can't be renovated. Split foyers. Unfortunately, split foyers are often, you walk into a split foyer, you've got an up, you've got a down with the stairs. Most of those stairways are narrow, so you can't even add a stair glider to them. Many of them were not constructed with the idea of creating one level that could be single level living. So it's just a lot of the existing units simply are not built in a way to renovate for accessibility. So sometimes that's a challenge. The unit itself is not a good candidate to be renovated for wheelchair accessibility. I mean, the key is you're probably going to have to work with an engineer. If you need to deal with moving walls or anything like that, you're probably going to have to work with an engineer to know if it can even be done in the home. So that a big challenge is the existing units. Beyond the cost, beyond finding the contractors, it's just the existing units are so difficult to renovate.
And along those lines, the cost of destroying walls and building new ones up, how does the cost of modification compare to the cost of living in an assisted living facility?
Thank you for that question, because I think that's always a good counterpoint to think about when you're really thinking about the cost of a renovation. An assisted living can range, $4,000 to $6,000 a month, depending on the facility, depending on the type of services you hire from that facility. You can see nursing homes go from $8,000 to $10,000 a month. depending on the community, depending on the services provided within that facility. I mean, when I was in Sioux Falls at the Sioux Empire Home Show, one person I spoke to about housing said that he'd paid $97,000 for 1 year in a nursing home, and somebody else in Bismarck told me that they kept their father in the home 7 years longer by making renovations. So if you imagine spending 7 years in a nursing home at $97,000 a year, I mean, that's almost $700,000. I mean, you could take a fraction of that money and make renovations to the home and be able to stay in a place that's your own, that, is in the community you love. I mean, it just expands your options.
And I noticed we're kind of running out of time here. So
I saw that.
Just a couple more questions if we can try to squeeze them in. You
Yep.
mentioned that the vision for this project is to have every home constructed to enhance the quality of life for all people. What would that look like?
Really, enhancing quality of life is being able to do those most basic things that we take for granted, using the bathroom. We take it for granted now, but when a person, can't get into the bathroom, and they need help from assistive technology like a walker or a wheelchair, it can be really dehumanizing, to not be able to use that bathroom independently, because that's what these modifications do. They help us retain our independence for a much longer period of time. So that quality of life is really being able to be in your home, to be with the people that you love. We're trying to create the opportunity for families to live intergenerationally again. I mean, people like to talk about how Americans aren't intergenerational. I'm like, we used to live that way. And I think we're going to move back that way just because of the sheer cost of housing, the sheer cost of assisted living and nursing home level care. I think more families are going to opt to live intergenerationally, to have, grandmas and grandpas, living with young families. And I think that truly takes us back to our roots, to who we truly are, as a people. So I really think it just gives that opportunities for families, to be families, to retain their independence, in the home for a much longer period of time. I mean, there are some times when nursing homes and assisted living care is necessary, and I don't want to say they're going to be gone and they'll never exist. In some cases, they're completely necessary. That's what has to happen. And I'm not going to get into details about that. But at the end of the day, having that, enhancing quality of life for all people is really ensuring that people can do the activities they need to do in their homes, so that they actually can stay in their home longer. Because that's what happens, is people lose the ability to do really important activities, and the bathroom is number one. And then they're forced into a higher level of care, when if they would have had, the adaptable home that could be accessible when needed, they would be able to stay in their home longer.
So, for my final questions, what triggered this project, or why did you become interested in this?
So I have been studying aging since 2009, so I started studying aging then. And, in those studies, I really believed firmly that, designing better homes was a key part of helping us age better, having better outcomes, retaining our independence longer, being able to do the things that we love, taking pride. My home, I love it. I'm proud of it. It's something that I've worked for. And, to be able to stay there, when I'm an older person, and I'm facing the end of my life, I just want to make that a reality for myself and others, that this thing that I've worked for my whole life, I don't lose because suddenly I have, mobility limitations or some other disability, that I'm able to keep my home. So I just learned early on that the design decisions that we make in our homes, in our products, even our technology, really have the ability to enable or disable us. And I just want to see more housing in South Dakota that enables us for as long as possible.
Absolutely. And then where can people find more information about this?
Definitely. You can visit the South Dakota State University website, that is extension.sdstate.edu. And you can search for my name, you can search for Voices for Home Modification, or you can search for Adaptable Home, and you will find it. You can also call my office at 605 394 1722.
Perfect. Well, unless there is anything else you would like to say, this has been a
No.
wonderful interview. Thank you for joining me.
All right, thank you again, Leacey. So Leacey actually provided some additional information that sometimes people believe Voices for Home Modification is advocating to standardize accessible or adaptable homes for all houses. Leacey says this is not the case. She states that the hope is for builders to focus building units for older people to downsize to. The key is they need to be adaptable so they can be made accessible if the older person plans to live there through end of life. Then existing units could be opened up to families who are less likely to need accessibility right now. I noticed that we had a couple of questions. One commenter says, my house was built a long time ago. My doors and halls aren't that large. Is there any information on how to see what would be the cost for my house to become an adaptable house? And to my best knowledge, that would vary between states. That would vary based on the contractors that you can find, based off of how many square feet the house is, what they can do to make it larger. As Leacey said in the live, you would probably lose space with your living room or whatever it is that is adjacent to the halls and the doors. But it really would just be determined by the contractor that you find. Someone else says, sorry, I couldn't really hear, but at what age should we homeowners be thinking of doing these renovations? And with that, it is certainly something to think about before you lose the ability to do things that you might have once been able to do. As Leacey said in the interview, mowing the lawn, shoveling snow, stuff like that. You definitely want to think about that before it gets to that point. However, this is something that should be considered earlier than you'd think because of all of the modifications that you might have to do for the house. On the other hand, you could move into a place that is accessible or adaptable. I haven't noticed any other comments or questions, so thank you very much for joining us. This has been KOTA Now with Diana Cohen, and I hope you have a wonderful day.